Welcome to the Cash Flow Chronicles. I'm your host, Jonny and the founder of Catani Capital Group. For the last 2 years, I've been studying alternative assets and now help solve the problem of creating passive cash flow for creators, influencers, and busy professionals by bringing you 5 episodes a week of easy to understand education in the world of passive investing. What's up, guys? Happy Friday. Welcome to another episode of Friday Follow-Up here on the Cash Flow Chronicles. I am your host, Jonny Catani, and we have made it through another week. Hope you guys had a great week. We got absolutely hammered with snow. It is literally still snowing, going on, probably 15 hours straight of snow. There's about 1.5 feet of snow outside my front door right now. Haven't left my house. I've walked outside, let the dogs out, but I've literally not left. That will change. I am going to leave the house because I'm getting stir crazy, but wanted to wait and let snow plows and everything kind of do their thing and hopefully clear the roads at least enough that it's manageable. But it's real. We got a lot of snow. I think the mountains are 20 plus inches. So this is what springtime is like in Utah. It's rare to get this much snow this time of year. In the valley, usually the temps are warmer to where it's raining in the valley and then it just snows in the mountains. But it is still kind of, winter. That doesn't usually start until about March. So the next week or so, the temps go up, and I think some of these snowstorms that are supposed to come will more than likely be rain. Now, if they do go through the night, usually there'll be snow and then there's slush and it's a mess. So this is kind of a double-edged sword type time of year, because in one hand, you've got the absolute mess that is the valley and driving around, and, roads are slushy and, everything, like I said, everything's a mess driving, but the skiing is quite literally world-class. I mean, the snow is incredible. These storms bring feet at a time. And it's just that champagne, that light, fluffy powder that you just kind of sink in. And it just, as the skiers call it, it's blower, dude. It's hella blower. That's ski term for just that powder that kind of blows everywhere. It's so light. So the skier in me is stoked, but logistically and infrastructure wise, it's a bit of a mess. But anyway, that's an update. We have, of course, have the best ever conference. Hello, brain fart. The best ever conference coming up here in a couple weeks, which will be right downtown, which I'm really excited for. A lot of awesome networking coming up. And you guys know my passion behind networking. But today I want to talk about something different. We're going to switch gears a little bit here. I've obviously, if you guys have been following along, I'm switching to the active side of the industry here. Going to start acquiring apartments here in Utah, specifically kind of the Salt Lake Valley. Big square area there known as the Salt Lake Valley. More or less between the airport and so the airport is like directly west of downtown. And so if you take downtown straight line to the airport, which is almost quite literally a straight line between the two. And then, in fact, I think it almost is, which is fascinating. And then you go straight south from the airport, and then you reach the point of the mountain, which is where Salt Lake County ends. Then you come back east till you hit the mountains. That big square area is more or less the valley. Technically, the valley goes all the way to the West Mountains, but the farther out you get, there's really no apartments out there. They really are building single families, a lot of townhomes, build to rent stuff, first time home buyer type stuff out there. And there's just nothing out there. That's starting to change because that's the only direction to go, like I've talked about. And starting to develop apartments out there, which are not out of our buy box, but, certainly not our first choice. But anyway, got off on a tangent there. Classic. Because I'm switching gears to that, what I've had to do is start underwriting. And if you're not familiar with what underwriting is basically the science / art, mostly science, but there's definitely some art involved, which I'll get to. But it's basically the science behind the deal, right? So basically what it is an Excel spreadsheet that's got all these formulas that do all these different calculations. And essentially what you're doing is you're dissecting the asset. So in this case, the apartment, you're dissecting the apartment based on its current financials. Basically you're basically taking its current financials, how it's currently operated, right? So current numbers, what they call a T12, which is a trailing 12, which is basically all of the financial data for the last 12 years. And depending on the ownership group or the current owners or whomever it might be, will determine how accurate that is and whether or not it's, a Dropbox folder with all the details, or if it's literally on scratch paper, which I have received some deals, mostly that are kind of mom and pop. They're quite literally on yellow padded paper. It's gnarly. And you're like, how have you made it this long, collecting rents and keeping track of things and filing taxes and, all of the things that are required to operate a business? Because ultimately that's what these are. When you get into, 40, 50 plus unit complexes, these are a business. And then once you hit 100, it's a business. You've got on-site management and, there are more variables at play, which really, really make it a business, which is why underwriting is so important, because when you're underwriting, you're more or less analyzing the business, right? How it's currently ran. Are there areas to improve it? Can we add revenue? What we call top line revenue. So basically, can we increase rents? Can we, add fees, application fees, rent fees, late fees, pet fees? Can we do basically, can we charge back utilities, right? What they call RUBs, right? Which are basically utility bill backs. Let me find the exact definition of a RUB here. So basically what you're doing is you're going through and you're looking at all of those, you're analyzing all of those details based on the current operation. And then if that, and then you're also looking, can we run it more efficiently? Can we decrease revenue, right? Perhaps, easy revenue efficiencies would be, if you already own an apartment in the area, can, for instance, what if you bought an apartment complex right next door to one that you already own? Well, then you wouldn't need 2 on-site managers, right? You could have 1 on-site manager or whatever team is managing the current apartment complex can manage the other one. I've seen that happen. Greenlight did that with an acquisition in Oklahoma City, which made it very efficient, which then in turn, decreases your, okay, sorry to interrupt that. A RUBS, ratio utility billing system, fancy way of saying that basically you're billing back the utilities to the tenants, right? Not everywhere does that. Some have it included in the rent, to a certain extent. There's various ways to kind of recoup that. RUBS is one way, increasing rent is another. There are efficiencies like, bringing in basically a corporate agreement with cable and internet, right? And then charging a flat rate to the residents for cable and internet, so it's in-house. But what I was saying before with your operational efficiencies is, perhaps you can decrease those, right? find a way, a big movement a while back and is still possible is the green movement, changing everything to LED to reduce, energy usage, maybe updating plumbing or HVAC, right? A little bit of a heavy lift, right? So, going to go to your CapEx budget, which capital expenditures, which I'll get to. But, perhaps that will decrease, energy and water and, your heating and cooling, and therefore decreasing your expenses, right? So essentially that's underwriting at a glance is, analyzing all of the data that you have. And then what you do is you put it into your underwriting model, which is your Excel spreadsheet. And from there, basically what you're doing is you're taking, what does it currently look like? Let's say it's 100 units. Okay. 90 of those units are, one bed, one bath. 8 of them are 2 bed, 1 bath. And then, 2 of them are 3 bed, 1 bath, right? And then, so you basically put in your unit mix. So you'll enter all of that in. You will then put in the corresponding rents, basically what rents are currently being collected. And then, from there, you'll kind of gather information, right? Okay, are rents below market? So can we without doing anything, can we immediately come in and increase rents? A lot of times what happens with previous management is, management will slip, right? So maybe, it hasn't been their best asset, so they've stopped giving it attention. And so rents are below market, and, maybe occupancy's at, 90%, which is 90% is considered stabilized. It's the industry standard for a stabilized asset. But then you have your economic occupancy. How much of that 90 of those, 90 units that are occupied, how many of those tenants are paying rent on time or at all, right? Are you going to have to come in and evict people? Are there late fees, collections, what they call loss to lease, right? Which is just that. Loss to lease includes, people who aren't paying. It also includes any concessions. Maybe economically things aren't going well, and so there are some concessions, which are basically discounts. Maybe you get your first month free, when you sign a 12-month lease, right? So there's all of these different variables that kind of go into it, and you'll get all of that information and you'll put all of that into the underwriting model. And from there, you will start to play with the numbers, right? There'll be formulas to determine your debt. What's your debt look like? You're going to use a bridge loan. Is there a big CapEx budget, right? If you're doing all new HVAC and updating, you want to update, all of them are still classic units, right? Old appliances, old countertops, maybe there's carpet and you want to put in, vinyl or what, whatever flooring, you have a big CapEx budget, which is capital expenditures. And so you'll use a bridge loan, because what bridge will do is basically it basically serves as a bridge between your, from your acquisition. So basically the time you acquire it to when you get it stabilized and updated and you refinance to a basically a long-term, what they call agency debt, right? Which is typically your 10-year fixed rate debt. That's your typical agency debt, which is still Fannie and Freddie, same as in the residential world. And so, but what a bridge loan will do is it will also fund your your CapEx, right? So it'll fund all of your renovations and HVAC and all of the new upgrades that you're going to do. Maybe you need to, do all new exterior. Maybe it needs a new roof, right? So those are kind of all the details that you punch in. And, one thing I want to say, you guys, which has been huge for me in my underwriting is shout out to my man, Rob Beardsley, great friend, also a fellow Raise Master. He's now a Raise Masters coach. He's, kind of the leading name in underwriting, wrote an incredible book, The Definitive Guide to Underwriting Multifamily Acquisitions, develop the skills to confidently analyze and invest in multifamily real estate. I read this book. It's a fairly easy read. He does a really, really great job of breaking down an underwriting model and making it very easy to understand so that when you go and look at an underwriting model, let's say you want to start underwriting, or maybe you, as part of your due diligence, you want to scrutinize someone's underwriting. You don't just want to see the pro forma, but you want to actually see, their model and how they derived all of these numbers. This book is a really, really great place to start. So highly recommend this book. And, so what'll happen is you'll enter all these numbers, right? So you'll enter your trailing 12 numbers, your unit mix, current rents, what you think you can get the rents to, or what they call your pro forma rents, and all of your stabilized expenses. So you'll enter their current expenses and then what you think your expenses will be once the asset is stabilized. You'll enter your loan, basically your debt. In this case, we'll just assume that there's no CapEx and we're going straight to a 10-year fixed rate. Currently, right now, loan to value ratios are right around like 65%, right? So you've got to, you're putting 35% down. Gone are the days of your 70% LTV, 75% loan to value. So you're basically, only getting, your loan is more or less on 65% instead of 70%, which means you've got to raise more equity, right? And so you enter all this information and then you enter all of your assumptions, and your assumptions are, I'll break them down really basic. This is going to be like a really, really high level episode on underwriting, and we'll kind of break it down each week and get more and more into the weeds. But your assumptions are more or less, things like rental growth. What do you assume rental growth will be, for the year, right? Or for the whole period, which is basically essentially 3 to 5 years typically, but could be up to 10 years, right? If you got a 10-year loan, you can hold it for all 10 years. And some do. Some will refinance in year 3 or year 5, give investor the principal investment back to their investors. And then, there'll be some kind of split and so on. But we'll get to that in later episodes. So you'll enter all these assumptions. Like I said, you've got an assumption like something like your vacancy rate, right? Your stabilized vacancy rate. Industry standard, right around 7%. That's a very conservative, right? So basically assuming that you're always going to have a 7% vacancy, which on a 100-unit complex would mean that, 7 units are always vacant, right? Which is really not that many, right? That's a really solid 93% occupancy is really solid, especially if you get a 93% occupancy rate and then 100% economic occupancy, which means all 93 tenants are paying their rent on time, right? That would be amazing, right? And when you get into Class A multifamily, that's very common, right? You're talking about a higher level of tenant, typically has, higher income, somewhere in the 80, 75, 80, 100,000 plus range. And, if you're charging, the average rents right now in Class A in Salt Lake City are about $1,600. So if someone's making $80,000, $100,000 a month, that's basically what $8,500, or sorry, $100,000 a year. That's 80. Someone do the quick math for me. What's that? $8,500 a month. Why does that sound wrong? That is wrong. No, that's, yeah, 80. Yeah, about that. Let's see. Let me math that really quick. That comes out to, I was close, 8,333, 83,333, right? So basically, I was close. I knew I was right. Never doubted for a second. Anyway, so 8,500. So, you break that down, let's say, just for easy argument, they're taking home 7,500 net. So, 1,600, um, 7,500 net, and you have a $1,600 a month. So let's see, 1,600 divided by 500. That's 21%. So basically 20% of their, of their income is going to rent. That's, most of those people should be able to pay that, right? Or should be paying that on time. And the average savings amongst A-class residents is $3,000. So, even if they were to get laid off, you more or less have 2 months. Basically, they could cover their rent for 2 months with their savings, after they lose their income, which is typically enough time for them to get another job, right? So that shows you right there why investors and operators love A-class, right? Because you've got a solid tenant base like that. But essentially what I'm getting at is, you're putting all of this info in there. And then what that does is, at a high level, basically tells you, what kind of returns you're going to get at the investor level, what your IRR is going to be. And then from there, you've got different levers you can pull, right? You can increase your, you could increase the rental growth, right? So I think my model that I use, I mean, super conservative. When I say super conservative, I mean, my assumption is 2% rental growth. Last year, Salt Lake City went up 12%. This year, it's on track to go up 8%. So 2% is extremely conservative. And the reason that conservative underwriting is so important is that if a deal pencils, right? If I put everything in, don't pull any levers or change any of the assumptions, and I'm getting really good returns and really good debt service cover ratio, what they call DSCR, debt service cover ratio, basically what lenders look at to determine whether or not you can cover your debt based on your current income. So the industry standard that lenders want to see, especially right now, is 1.25. And they're probably not going to go much lower than that unless you have a really good relationship with that lender and you have a proven track record. They might give you some leeway there. But if you're new, so let's just assume they're not going to give you any leeway, 1.25. So if all of a sudden I'm seeing a 1.5 debt coverage service ratio, DSCR, just based on very, very conservative assumptions, very conservative initial underwriting, well, we might be onto something there, right? So that means that, if I'm able to enter those numbers, get that kind of DSCR and, give a solid projected return, well, all of a sudden you acquire that asset and you come in, you raise rents, maybe you increase the occupancy, maybe, you needed to increase marketing, or, there were some operating inefficiencies. You increase those efficiencies, and all of a sudden, the rent growth is 8%. Well, you're able to provide an even better return to your investors than you initially thought, which ultimately leads to happy investors, which ultimately leads to repeat investors. So that's a very high level breakdown, very, very high level. Again, you can read Rob Beardsley's definitive guide to underwriting multifamily acquisitions, and it will break it down even more, which I will do. What I think we're going to do is each week we'll kind of break down a little bit more. That was very high level and like initial stages of underwriting. And what I'll start doing is, as we find deals, I'll break down deals with you guys here What I may even start doing is start screen sharing and show you guys. I use Rob's underwriting model. It's available. You can go on his website, lonestarcapital.com, and find his underwriting model. I believe it's available. Don't quote me on that. But you can always reach out to him and he'll send it to you. You guys, one thing I want to say about underwriting, there are no secret underwriting formulas that someone has, some proprietary underwriting formula that makes it so their deals are better than anyone else's. That does not exist, I promise. So if nobody is willing to send you their underwriting model, you should be curious about that. I'm not saying that, people should just send you their model so that you can use it to underwrite your own deals. But if you're vetting a sponsor and even more importantly, vetting one of their deals, and you want to see the underwriting and they won't send it to you because they're trying to convince you there's some proprietary formula in there that they don't want you to have access to, that's false. Okay? I promise. That means that their assumptions are probably not conservative, right? That means that they may have underwritten at an 8 to 10% rental increase every single year for all 5 years of the projected hold period. That is a big red flag. That's a huge red flag, right? And we'll kind of get to some other things too. Next episode, we'll talk about, sensitivities, right? There's some levers you can pull. What if all of a sudden, you're at 80% occupancy, the whole entire economy crashes and you're at 80% occupancy. What's going to happen? What if interest rates go up? What if you're on a floating rate debt piece on a bridge loan and interest rates go up and you're not ready for it? Or, you plan to refinance in 3 years and interest rates are too high and you can't refinance. What does that look like? Are you able to still operate? Does the deal still look good? So in the next episode next week, we'll talk about some different levers you can pull. And, we'll talk about assumptions and, different ways you can tweak your assumptions and different levers and tweaks you can make based on different operation styles and right, like I said, different efficiencies or inefficiencies or, some different market economics that could play in that would still allow you to underwrite conservatively, but not, so aggressively that you're like, you're underwriting a 12% increase for all 5 years, right? That's just silly. And if you're doing that right now and you're listening to this, please stop doing that. Okay. Doesn't matter what market you're in. I don't care if you're in Phoenix or Austin. Do not do that. It's not to say you can't pull that lever to see what that would look like to determine, what a lot of times you'll see on a pro forma is you'll see like a worst case scenario. You'll see a worst case scenario. You'll see the kind of the mid tier, which is basically kind of what they're. So a lot of times what good operators will do is they'll underwrite at worst case scenario. And then if it pencils there, then they'll increase some of they'll, add their efficiencies into it and actual market data, still conservative, right? Like for me, what that would mean is like, what would it look like to have 5% rental increase over 5 years, right? So then that might be what I would put as like our mid tier. And then best case scenario, what does it look like if all 8 years have an 8% increase, right? So that's pretty common to see on a pro forma or on an offer memorandum or pitch deck, whatever you want to call it, for a deal. And those are kind of the different levers. So we'll talk about those next week. Thank you guys so much for listening. As always, I'm always very grateful to all of the listeners. Downloads are starting to pick up. We love to see it. Follow me on Instagram and TikTok at Jonny Cattani. Social media is starting to flow. You can be the first to get access to my 5-step passive investor due diligence process, 5 steps to your first passive investment. That will be available soon. Go to www.investwithcattani.com, or you can go to thecashflowchronicles.com, same name as the podcast, cashflowchronicles.com, and enter your information and subscribe to the list. In the meantime, I'm going to send you a lot of awesome freebies and a lot of value to get you started on your path towards passive investing into commercial real estate. I am very excited. Thank you guys so much for listening. I will see you guys next week. See ya. Thank you again for tuning in. Who do you know that wants more cash flow? Share this episode with them so you can grow your cash flow together. If you enjoyed the show, make sure you're subscribed on your platform of choice so you never miss a new episode. Go to KataniCapitalGroup.com to learn more.